Hello everyone and welcome to my May wrap up. I wasn't planning to do a May wrap up. The plan was to do a quarterly wrap up like I had said, but I managed to get out of my reading slump and I'm averaging like over 10 books a month, and I feel like that's a lot to put into one quarterly wrap up. So if the month justifies it, I'll just do a wrap up because I read 12 books in the month of May, and I just want to sit down and yap to you about the books I read in May because I read a good few 4 stars. I read a really solid bunch of books across the month of May. It was a really good reading month for me. I'm so happy with the books that I managed to read in May, so let me tell you all about them. So the first one I read in the month of May is Keeping 13. It was my reread. I basically read The Boys of Tommen, was it 2 years ago? I want to say 2024. Around this time, 2024, for the first time. And in anticipation, I was hoping that we would have had a release by now for the most recent Boys of Tommen book, but there's no release as of yet. So I planned basically my reread around hoping to have a release around this time, but obviously it hasn't happened that way. So I've slowed down my reread and I'm currently on I just finished Saving 6. I am starting Redeeming 6 today. So I read Keeping 13 in the month of May and it was just as good as I remember. This is the second book in Johnny and Shannon's story, but we're getting obviously glimpses of our other characters that we see later in the series. And Keeping 13 is my favourite. I feel like it's the most emotional punch, and I'm saying this while thinking at the same time that obviously releasing 10 impacted me a lot more emotionally than Keeping 13 did. But I just think going back and reading it again, feeling all those feelings I felt 2 years ago, and I felt exactly the same sitting there reading it, the exact same emotions, the way I felt for these characters, because I just think The Boys of Tommen just feels very close to home, very much. It just feels like a splice of life. Like I could pick a few friends or I could pick a few people out of my life that I've known or have met, and I could pop them in and that would be their story. So it just feels very relatable and very well done, and I gave it 5 stars. Keeping 13 has and always will be a 5-star read for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm so happy to have read the series and to now get the opportunity to reread them. But I always, if I ever get amnesia, the only thing I want to forget is how that series plans out and to read it for the first time again. But obviously that's not going to happen. But if it could, that would be the one thing I would want my brain to forget. The next book that I read in the month of May, this book I read as part of my series for if can I read the book before I go to sleep, and I've now adapted it to can I read the book before my boyfriend finishes work, because it's kind of similar time frame wise. But Broken Country was one of those episodes. Broken Country is by Claire Leslie Hall. We are following Beth, Gabe, and also Beth's husband Frank. And Gabe and Beth have a past, and Beth is now married to Frank, and they were together in the past. Obviously she's with someone new now and she hasn't seen him in a long time, and then all of a sudden he's there again, and there is a murder trial going on simultaneously as well, and she's watching the man she loves go on trial for murder. And honestly, the plot twist in this is very well done. I didn't expect it to go the way it did, and I genuinely didn't expect to love it as much as I did. And I liked the ending in particular. I feel like the ending was a very smart way to end it, because I genuinely didn't predict it. I managed to read it in one sitting and very thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a very short book. It's 300 pages. it gave me similar vibes to Where the Crawdad Sings, but not exactly, just aesthetically, I think, and the murder trial and being set like in an older time frame. So that's the comparisons with Where the Crawdad Sings, but other than that, there's not really much else similar. The next book I read was Loved One by Aja Muhara. This is following Julia, whose close, like, love turned friend, Gabe. Very on theme here. There's 2 Gabes in a row, which is weird. And she ends up meeting his ex-girlfriend at his funeral because he's passing away, and it's a book about grief. And Julia is sent by Gabe's mother to start retrieving sentimental things that are of value to him, and then she ends up meeting the ex-girlfriend Elizabeth, and Elizabeth and Julia basically end up going on this journey together, and it's a really, really lovely story. I really enjoyed it. Like that these 2 women kind of helped each other with their grief through meeting each other, and I thought that was interesting. The next book I read is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, and I feel like if you've been living under a rock if you haven't heard of this book. I think I saw it once. It's like that, like, is it like Yellow Elephant thing? If you say it, like, you start thinking about it or seeing things that, like, you've mentioned. And I feel like I thought about wanting to read this book, and then I saw everyone I knew reading it, so I obviously had to get involved. It is such a short, quick read, and we're following Sybil. So Sybil sits down every day. She writes her letters to all the people that she writes to every day, until one day she has gotten a letter for a secret that she doesn't really want to uncover. And I really liked the use of like emails and letters in this book. It's all told through that way, through Sybil's correspondences, so the letters and emails that she sends to people and the responses that she gets back from others. And it's just a really beautiful story. I would highly recommend it if you're looking for something like down the literary fiction genre. Would highly recommend this. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I've read is Picking Daisies on Sundays by Liana Sincotti, and this is one I've been wanting to get to for a very, very long time, and I put it on my spring TBR this year and I managed to read it. This follows Daisy and Levi. Daisy and Levi knew each other years ago, but Daisy's always had a crush on Levi, whereas Levi's kind of never given Daisy the time of day. He's always kind of seen her as a friend. They haven't seen each other for a long time, and then they're both going through quite personal things, grief in particular, and they manage to end up meeting 4 years later, and Levi needs a fake date to his sister's wedding, so he asks Daisy, and then basically they end up reconciling through that. I'm very excited to get to more of Liana Sincotti's books. I really wanted to read Don't Be in Love and the new one coming out, A Summer of Stars. The next book I read was a thriller, which is called First Wife's Shadow by Adele Parks, and I gave this book 3 stars. This book is basically following, I can't even remember any of the characters' names, but we have the CEO woman who is on her own. She hasn't been with anyone in a while. She's just living her single life, and she ends up meeting this guy, and kind of everyone in her life is telling her, this is moving too fast, you need to be careful, you need to look after yourself and protect yourself. And she's just head over heels in love with this man. He had lost his first wife. His first wife had passed away, and she is wanting to meet like his friends and everything, and she's wanting to get involved in his life, but he's never really giving her that. And they end up getting married, and then these weird things start happening to her, and there's no explanation for it. And lo and behold, you find behind the scenes what's going on. And it is a very, very interesting like book, and I genuinely didn't guess the plot twist, to be honest, so I was quite happy that it was a plot twist that I didn't guess off the bat. But if you're looking for a thriller and you haven't found any good ones recently, then I would recommend that one. The next one after this was First Lie Wins, and I think this is one of Reese Witherspoon's recommended books, of like part of her book club. I gave it 3.25 stars, and I cannot tell you a single thing about it. I do not remember a single thing. So we're just going to read the description, and hopefully it'll like bring something back into my mind, because I genuinely cannot remember. The identity. Oh yes, the identity comes first. Evie Porter. So once she's given a name and a location by her mysterious boss, she learns everything there is to know. Then the Mark Ryan Sumner. The last piece of the puzzle is the job. Eve isn't privy to Mr. Smith's real identity, but she knows the job will be different. Ryan has gotten under her skin and she's starting to envision a different sort of life for herself, but Evie can't make it happen. I remember this, yeah. And then we're getting a lot of past of different identities she's assumed over the years. And at the very, very end, there is a twist that I did not expect at all. And that's what made it the 3.25 stars. But I can't remember anything else but the ending. So yeah, there's that. Then another one that I have physically. This is actually a new release and I was very, very excited to pick this up because Maria had recommended it to me. She read it in her 24-hour readathon, and if you are not following her on YouTube, you need to. I will leave her channel up here and I will tag her in the description below so you can go and watch her. Her name is Living Through Pages on YouTube and all other social platforms, and she's one of my book besties and she's amazing, so you need to go follow her. So I read this basically on a recommendation from her because she rated it 5 stars and I was just, she sold it to me. The concept of the story sold it to me. So we have these twins, Madeline and Chelsea. Basically, they are child stars and they reach really high fame. But Madeline goes missing and Chelsea, just like her fame, skyrockets. And so we go between like 2002 and 2025, and we go from 2002 and then like the chapters are leading up in dates up to 2025. The only reason I rated this at 3 stars, and the only reason was because I felt like there was a lot of loose ends with our characters, and I felt like the ending was kind of predictable once certain aspects started to unfold. And if it was like 50 pages longer, I maybe could have bumped it up to 4 stars if there had been a bit more of a resolution. I just felt like there wasn't enough for me, but I really liked the use of the child actors and like the abuse of power in that industry, and it gave me the vibes of the Nickelodeon type days of the child actors. So I did really enjoy it. It's just those endings just weren't it for me. So personally for me, it was just that little bit lackluster because of the lack of closure I felt when I finished. But if you like those vibes of the early sitcom days, child stars, and then there's a little bit of a mystery element added into it, then definitely give this a go. The next book that I read is Normal People by Sally Rooney. And this is something that I've put off for such a long time. I've watched the series multiple times, but I just never ever got to reading the book. And this follows Connell and Marianne, and it follows them through secondary school up to college, and then through the end basically we finish at the end of their college lives. And it just shows the turbulence of their relationship and the on again, off again, and just the story of 2 people navigating life and how that is and how hard it can be. And it's a beautiful story, and I love that it's Irish and it's written by an Irish author. So if you haven't read Normal People or watched the series, I highly recommend both, and I gave this 4.5 stars. The reason I gave it a 4.5 instead of a 5 was basically because, I don't know, is it just the edition that I have, or is it every edition? I actually need to look at it in bookstores to see is it every edition. But the dialogue wasn't separated from the paragraphs, so like when Connell or Marianne or whatever character will be talking, there wouldn't be inverted commas to let you know that it's dialogue, and that really took away from the reading experience for me. I felt like if the dialogue was clearly emphasized, then it would have been a 5 stars. But I love Connell and Marianne, and I think their relationship is very realistic and very true, and other people feels nostalgic. Next, I read Under My Skin by Heather Garvin. I have been lucky enough now to get 3 of Heather Garvin's books. I found her through TikTok and I really, really enjoy her writing. And this is a standalone as far as I am aware. And It came out in 2025. Basically, I got it as an arc on NetGalley, and I basically just pushed all my arcs to the back of my mind, and then I just started getting through them recently, so I read it recently, and I gave it 3.75 stars. A lot of issues going on for Lucy as well as Everett, and Everett is Lucy's brother's best friend, and Lucy's kind of always had a crush on Everett, and she comes back to town because there's issues going on with her family that have just been kind of dumped on her, and then simultaneously Everett is going through the loss of his father. And I just loved how Everett was there for Lucy but knew when to like take a step back and be like, I'm here for you, but I'm here from you from over there if you need me to be over there. Like, he didn't smother her, he wasn't on top of her, he let her handle what she was going through herself, which I found to be very healthy. And then the brother's best friend trope is obviously always going to get me because it's just like, it's obviously forbidden. And I really enjoyed Heather Garvin's writing, particularly the stuff about grief, because it just happens to be another time of grief in my life, unfortunately, and I'm finding that I'm obviously gravitating to books with grief and people handling grief, so I found that very, very helpful. I would highly recommend if you're looking to get into Heather Garvin books. The second last book that I read this month is Everything to the Sea by Alicia Upano. This follows the story of Jane and Kenji. They have one summer of love and then they move from their small town, and because Jane has big dreams to be in the big city, but then a tsunami hits their town and Kenji remains, but Jane wants to live her new life with her best friend in California, and they don't see each other anymore, and then 7 years later they end up meeting again, and you see how they both handled this traumatic event differently, and why the other couldn't understand why Jane couldn't understand why Kenji was making certain decisions, and Kenji couldn't understand why Jane was making certain decisions, but they were both acting out of grief and trauma, and they were just both reacting in their own individual ways to handle it the best way that they could at the time. And I think both sides are very valid, and that's why it was such a good read, because I could see both points of view, and it was just a beautiful story. And it was really interesting to read about a tsunami because we wouldn't experience something like that on this side of the world, so it's interesting to see the impact of such a crazy natural disaster. I just found it really interesting, the use of natural disasters, because people seem to be very fascinated with natural disasters, and there's actually a quote in the book that I'll include here about natural disasters and like why people are fascinated with them, me included. And this book doesn't come out until July 14th, so if you are interested based on what I said, then definitely pick it up on July 14th. And then the last and final book that I read in the month of May is What Happens After Midnight by K.L. Walter. So in this book we're following Lily and Taggart. The name, there's no need for that name, like there is no need, honestly, but it is their last final 2 months before they're finished senior year. Taggart and Lily used to be together, but they're not anymore. And then when you're a senior in the school that they're in, there is this tradition where there is like I don't know what it's called, like a prankster or a joker or something like that. And they are tasked with handling the prank for the senior year class, and they like draft in the people that they want to be a part of it, and lo and behold Lily ends up being a part of it. And I really enjoyed it. It's a really quick, fun time. There are some bits that are definitely cringy. The relationship between the mother and daughter was definitely trying to be Lorelai and Rory, but like it just annoyed me because as I get older, Lorelai and Rory's relationship annoys me more and more. So watching that being played out, as well as the mother having a grumpy chef boyfriend, is very Luke. It just felt very Gilmore Girls, and the school felt more like it should have been a college setting. as opposed to a secondary school, high school setting, because it felt very formal and like, I don't know, maybe that's just me and just imagery wise, but those were like my main two issues with the book. And then obviously Taggart's name, like what was the need for that? But I liked the like scavenger mystery element with it. So 3.75 stars. It was my favorite K.L. Walter book I've read so far, so I highly recommend reading this one if you haven't. And that is all the books that I read in the month of May. I may be back in June with another wrap up depending on how many books I managed to read this month, but I am very, very happy with the month I had in May. I read a lot of really good reads, and I'm excited for my June read/TBR. If you haven't seen that, I uploaded my boyfriend picking my June TBR, and let me know if you've read any of the books that I spoke about in my wrap up, or if you're planning to get to them anytime soon, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.